Hello, I'm Neil Knobloch,
I'm Wei Wei Wah.
and we're here to present to you a series of modules focused on integrating STEM through ag, food, and natural resources. In this first module, it'll be an introduction to integrated STEM, and after this module, you'll be able to define integrated STEM teaching, identify the components of STEM integration, and how integrated learning is different than conventional single content learning. And then third, be able to analyze STEM integration components and select those components that work best in the context with your students. First, we'd like to give you a roadmap of what integrated STEM looks like through ag, food, and natural resources. We define this as integrated STEM being an intentional and purposeful blending of multiple disciplines, both academic and vocational, to help students meaningfully learn and apply academic content through real-world problems framed in design complex systems and grounded in career and technical education contexts that facilitate multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, or transdisciplinary learning for the development of lifelong and workforce development connections and skills. You'll see that we'll walk you through these 4 steps as we work through these modules. But it begins with 2 common themes. As you do integrated STEM through ag, food, and natural resources, it's based upon real-world problems, and it gives students opportunities to practice 21st century skills by solving those problems. Step number 1, we'll look at the number of STEM disciplines, and we'll also look at different designs to implement integrated STEM. Step 2, we'll look at the role of STEM, ag, and the ag, food, and natural resources disciplines as they work together in STEM integration. Step number 3, we'll focus on making connections, cultural, context, and community connections, as well as career. And the final step is that we'll bring you to a point of how to then analyze what are the levels of integrated STEM, particularly multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, or transdisciplinary learning as 3 different types of STEM integration. So now we'd like to present a practical approach to looking at what is integrated STEM. So we'll provide you with 4 statements of some teachers in a context with students, and we're just going to see what your thoughts are if these are integrated STEM. The first one, a 6th grade science teacher had his students record daily weather conditions and report the average temperature for a month. What are your thoughts? You think it's integrated STEM? It's not integrated STEM, or maybe you just need more information? Go ahead and mark it down on your sheet, and we'll come back through these one by one. A 2nd grade teacher had her students create a zoo guide map for visitors to teach her students about the concept of distance and scale. Go ahead and mark this one down. 3rd, an agriculture and mathematics teacher team up and help 9th and 10th grade students develop a plan for a community fundraising event where they can sell agricultural products, horticulture products that students will grow in the school's greenhouse. What are your thoughts? Integrated STEM? Yes, no, or maybe? And the 4th one, a youth educator took his students to visit a local ketchup company, a manufacturing company, and then asked his students how STEM played a role in making the ketchup. Go ahead and mark this one down as well. So now let's go through these pretty quickly. How'd you do? Well, Dr. Wong and I went through these, and we felt that the first one was just simply based in a science context. And although you could bring a little bit of the mathematics out, it was pretty much just doing science in a science context. So we marked it down as no. There's potential, obviously, you could go further. The second one, we felt that there was context there that STEM could be learned, both science, zoology or zoo wildlife ecology, also the landscape design and layout in a zoo setting. And then, of course, you have distance and scale, which would be mathematical modeling. So there's certainly, you can see the blending of disciplines existing there. The third one is you have 2 teachers in 2 different content domains working together, and here they're doing a community fundraising event. Well, you have certainly how to grow plants, which could be biology and science. You also have the marketing component of agricultural products, and you have, of course, the mathematics of tracking how students are doing on their input cost as well as their revenue. Certainly the opportunity for integrated STEM. The fourth one, A youth educator took students to a local ketchup company and said, what were the STEM roles in making ketchup? This seems pretty superficial. It pretty much context-based and not really much content. So you can see how that also didn't really get into the level of integrated STEM as we're going to talk about in this module. So as a reminder, there are two common themes for teaching integrated STEM through AFNR. Number one, based upon real world problems, there we go. And number two, that it helps students practice 21st century skills through solving these problems. Some of those could be critical thinking, teamwork, creativity, problem solving, and so on. So STEM integration, being based upon real world problems, has several characteristics. Number one, they need to be authentic. They need to actually model what happens with professionals in the real world. Number two, they need to have some level of complexity. So we don't want to just say they need to be complex and you leave students hanging, but there needs to be some layers of complexity there. So a simple task is something that's solved pretty easily, only takes maybe a minute or two, where complexity you'll have to then kind of tease out what is the problem, and you'll have to maybe work through several different steps in solving that problem. Number three, the learner also will develop these 21st century skills, as we just mentioned, the previous slide. And you're also helping them see that these skills are done by professionals in the field, in real world careers. And they get paid to do this because it's part of their career, it's part of their job. And number five, it's also about making connections to communities. So these problems can have implications, positive or negative, consequences to people. And they can be, which we call socially or culturally relevant. So it can be a positive outcome, or it could even have negative consequences depending on what decisions are made in solving that real world problem. So back to one of the previous examples we had, a youth educator going to a local ketchup company and then asking students how STEM plays a role. How would you modify this based upon this as an opportunity to maybe go into more integrated STEM? What would you do? Well, you can see there's certainly authenticity there because of the real world context, but maybe there is a need for more complexity, or having students actually solve a problem, giving them a problem, or maybe identifying a number of problems that are being solved in that local ketchup company, and then having them work through that so they can see this is what real world people do in the STEM field when they work in these careers. So just an example of how you could go further with that particular case. So now we'd like to share a couple scenarios with you and show you the differences between two real world problems. Scenario one, Lisa goes to the grocery store and she does some shopping. A bag of sugar, 2.5 kilograms, costs $4. She tries to figure out how much this sugar would be per pound because she's used to the imperial units. So what do you think? Is this an authentic problem? Absolutely. Something that you may experience in the real world yourself. Is it complex? Not so much. You're basically going to try to just convert the unit. What is 2.5 kilograms into pounds? And you do simple math. Does it require some critical thinking? Yeah, it does, because you'll have to then convert those metric to imperial units. Does it relate to a STEM career? Not so much. It's more of a consumer-related scenario. Does it connect to the community? You could add the context of which local grocery store and maybe start to bring some of the nuances, but the way it's presented here is not really. Scenario two, a little longer, and you'll see how we did this to bring out these different layers. Water pollution has plagued the White River in Indiana for more than a century. And the most prevalent challenge for the White River are bacteria from animals and human feces. Tina is a civil engineer who works with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management to improve the sewage systems in Indianapolis. Is this an authentic problem? Is it real? Certainly it is. Something that has been around for a number of years and will continue to be challenges as we work through this type of impact of animals and humans on the environment. Is it complex? And when you think about the sources of pollution and maybe the different rainfall that occurs, or maybe different precipitations, different time of year, the slope, the runoff, certainly you start to see this is a layered problem. A number of different ways to look at it. Does it develop 21st century skills? Well, this is much more of an elevated critical thinking example, and you're going to likely have students working on this complex problem in a number of different ways, playing different roles from maybe the STEM career fields. Particularly, this is a civil engineer, but you could also have ecologist, you could have the wild water specialist, and nutrient management specialists that are involved in how this works, hydrologists, etc. So you can see how you could get a number of different STEM careers involved as you present this to students. And then does it connect to the community? Absolutely. It's been contextualized. The White River is in Indiana, and it's impacting also the city of Indianapolis. So you can see the difference between a more complex problem and a more simple problem. So again, STEM integration should help the learners practice these 21st century skills through solving problems, real-world, authentic problems. These STEM disciplines should then come together and really work together in a way that helps students to apply that content in solving the problem. And when they apply the STEM knowledge, they do it in a way that actually helps them make decisions, help them reach some conclusions, sometimes using evidence, or using scientific reasoning and logic to try to think through, this is how we're going to solve the problem. And they're drawing upon multiple disciplines in doing so. So back to one of the other scenarios we gave you, a second grade teacher had her students create a zoo guide map for visitors to teach her students about the concept of distance and scale. So how would you modify this now that you've had some exposure to different types of problems? In what ways would you modify this to try to layer this and present it to students for more complex problem solving? Well, you think about animals in a zoo. They prefer different habitats. So you're going to be thinking about where the best location would be to have the animals reside in this zoo setting. You're also going to be thinking about the landscape and maybe the slope. You're going to be thinking about the distance, if the consumers, the visitors will be able to walk the distance, or if you'll have to provide transportation. You'll have logistics involved in doing that. You also have quite a bit of mathematics going on as you start to lay out the size and the area and the distances and how things will then need to be designed to scale so that things are in balance in this zoo context. You also can go into the zoology, wildlife ecology. There's just a lot of different ways you could really take this example and try to layer the problem so that students can figure out, okay, how do we design what this zoo guide map would look like for the visitors?
All right. So besides what Dr. Nabla has mentioned earlier, the two common things for STEM integrations, when you really think about integrated STEM, there are a couple other things that you should put into your considerations. Those things are number of STEM disciplinary, implementation of design, and level of integration. And we will dissect those things in the following couple slides. So for the number and the role of disciplinary, how many disciplinary do you need to integrate? Well, there is no a single answer for those questions. Some of the scholars believe you should have at least 2 of the disciplinary. But some of the scholars believe that you should have to, must have all the 4 disciplinary integrate in your lesson. To us, we think as long as you have at least 2 of the disciplinary and it is meaningfully integrated, we won't think you must have the 4 or disciplinary. So how many disciplinary that that you need to integrate it? That is not the questions. The question should be looking at as a whole package, as other factors that you have. So we support meaningful integrate STEM is more important than numbers of disciplinary that you should integrate. As for the role of each disciplinary, we will have an extensive introduction in the module 2. So just stay tuned. How long do you want to teach integrated STEM, lesson and unit? Maybe I should ask, how much time do you have to teach integrated STEM lesson unit? This is another factor that you should wait while you trying to use integrated STEM teaching approach. How will you teach integrated STEM lessons? Are you going to do this just by yourself or having your colleagues to work with you? Those are three things. What we present here is a three strategy that you can use to teach integrated STEM. The individual teaching, co-teaching, and the teaching model. You probably already know what the individual teaching model looks like. It's a teacher planned lesson or unit by her or himself in the teaching in his or her classroom. As for the co-teaching model, teachers from the different disciplinary plan a unit and lesson together, and they also teach at the same classroom. As for the team teaching model, teachers from the different disciplinary and they designed and listen together, but they might teach the lesson in a different classroom. You might have a student overlap, or you might not have a student overlap in those integrated STEM teaching lessons. So here are some of another interesting factor, which is the last factor we're going to talk about today, but not the least. You should consider also the level of integration in your integrated STEM lessons. So in Module 1, we will share with you some of the models for level of STEM integration that scholars use to explain STEM integration. We will discuss those concepts more extensively in Module 4. Again, STEM 2 for Module 4. So some of the scholars dividing integrated STEM into context integration, content integration, and tool integration. Here are a table that we summarize for you the differences between those three different types of STEM integrations. So as you can see, the ways of integration in the context and the content are pretty similar. However, the learning goals are different. For the context, it's only a primary disciplinary contents that will be the focus of the integrated STEM. For the content integrations, you do multiple disciplinary contents actually are your learning goals. So to give you examples here, as we highlight the emphasized disciplinary. In biology, if you're doing the context integration, you are doing teaching the selective breeding, and you can use agriculture as a context. For example, needs chickens that produce large eggs as your context to teach your biology concept, selective breeding. Now, if you're doing the content integration, both biology and agriculture are highlighted. So you're not only teaching selective breeding, but also you want your student to learn what's the best egg-laying chickens for the breed. So the tool integration actually is kind of like extended from context and the content integration. So it's supporting basically what tool that you're using to teach your integrated STEM lesson. So in this examples, that all the things learning goals are highlighted, but also adding a tools, which is the DNA sequence that technology to learn about genetics engineering. So that is when you're adding more tool integration into the content integration. So hopefully this table helps to explain the differences between context, content, and tool integration. Another different integration level of integration is called single, multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary in here. And for our module, we also using this approach when we talked about level of integration. So, but however, please note, those models of integration just provide a way to help scholar to explain the type of a STEM integration. It doesn't mean that transdisciplinary is better than interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary here. We think meaningfully integrated STEM is more important than trying to force your lesson or your teachings of trying to push that into transdisciplinary. For example, if you only have 3 hours to do integrated STEM, instead of trying to push your lesson to a transdisciplinary, we think either multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary probably will give a better results of your outcome, students' outcome, than transdisciplinary lesson. So let's take a look at what multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary here. It's very specifically laid out in the slides. So basically, multidisciplinary students learn concept and skill in separate different disciplinary, but in reference to the contents, common things in here. As for interdisciplinary here, that we learned concepts from 2 or 3 more disciplinary and tie the link as the deep knowledge and the skill. So transdisciplinary students need to apply the knowledge and skill from the 2 or more disciplinary and help shapes the learning experience in here. So that is what we give to you of a level of a STEM integration. So let's wrap up. When you think about integrated STEM, first, you try to modify your lesson into more integrated STEM, or you develop some lesson plan for integrated STEM lesson. So what you needed to do is first select your real world problem, select a 21st century skill that students will practice through the problem solving, and then you select the level of integration, and implementation designs, and number and the role of disciplinary. So those are the things you need to take into considerations while you think about what your integrated STEM lesson looks like. So now here are some reflection questions for you to think about at the end of the module. What content, process, concept do I plan to teach my students? What is a real-world problem that I will use to structure my integrated STEM teaching? What are 3 to 4 21st century skills that I would like to focus on in my integrated STEM teaching? How will I mix the STEM integration components here? So those are the questions can help you structure your integrated STEM lesson. Now take out a plant, papers, a pen. So you're gonna using the same thing in module 2. So it's kind of building up from the module 1. Please keep this while you're watching module 2, and then you will find out why we ask you to do that. So this table and the question goes with the previous slide. So if you can answer the question from the previous slide, and you have complete the first step of transitioning your lesson plan into integrated STEM. So thank you.